So that's pretty cool. I went from this to this to this. So Acustica Audio have just released Sand 4, which is their loose take on a SSL 4000 console, and if you've ever listened to music, then you've heard one before. Instead of being purely algorithmic, Acustica Audio has become famous for sampling hardware pieces, this one in particular being the 4000 console at Digital Lake Studio. So aside from that, we're going to check out some other cool tools, and if you're a returning viewer who has been learning Logic Pro from my videos, then welcome back. But if you've just stumbled upon my page, then welcome to Como Music Creation, where I break down the tools, processes, and techniques that go into making new original music. So let's get started by making a beat. So Sand 4 is comprised of a channel strip, which is not a direct one-to-one to the SSL 4000. It's missing the gate section. So I'm actually going to use a different kind of gate, which I'll get to in a minute. So what it does have is the SSL style EQ and the filters, as well as samplings of each individual channel on the desk, which is really cool. They have line inputs as well as mic inputs, and a bus preamp as well. They have oversampling options, different sizes you can use, from small to giant, and a small amount of presets. Acustica doesn't really do the preset thing. So Sand 4 also has a standalone EQ with a graph, and it's not very responsive. Like, it's not going to be responsive like a Fab Filter plugin or a Waves plugin would be. As you can see, it's laggy, but it does offer some visual representation of what you're doing. And then on top of that, you have the bus compressor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all my tracks and route them to the same bus, and I'm going to put on the compressor, which I'll dig into in a moment. All right, so I'm just going to use the channel EQ and the compressor and do some live mixing. I'm going to start by putting a meter plugin on each channel before the channel strips, just to double check my recording levels. When you're using analog emulated plugins, you want to make sure that you're feeding them the right signal, and a Dorometer by Waves is a good way of doing that because you can set the reference to the range that these plugins want to see. Also, on the kick drum and the snare, I'm going to call up a new sort of gate plugin that I just bought called DeBleed. So DeBleed is like a modern take on a traditional gate plugin. It basically takes away all of the cymbals and the other drums from a source. So for instance, on this kick drum, you can hear that there's a lot of snare and some hi-hat coming through. And it just cleans it right up. And without too much tweaking, you're able to get a really nice, usable result. Cool. All right, so I'm gonna go line 1 on the kick. I guess if you click this Ultra button, then it bumps up the CPU usage a little bit, but it provides a more accurate emulation of the input characteristics or saturation. So I'm just gonna leave that Ultra on. So down here, these buttons go from the type of compressor from off to channel. And then this would be a bus compressor. But since we're doing individual elements of the mix, we're going to choose channel. Then over here on these buttons, you can choose whether you want your EQ section to be before or after the compressor. And over here, we get to see how much gain reduction is happening. I just want a little bit because I'm also going to be feeding all this stuff into this bus compressor. So the values written, meaning the numbers written on the EQs, are strange. Acustica has chosen to go a way that differs from what the normal plugins would do. So the numbers written in blue are what SSL would have on their pots. And then I guess the numbers written in white are what the actual values are of the center frequency. So here we have PluginDoctor open. So that would be this window. Next to them, I have the Sand4 plugin. And then over here on the left, I have the Waves G channel, which is a very old plugin at this point, but it was one of the first models of the SSL 4000G. Now, what I did was I matched the curves of each plugin the best that I could. So when I changed the EQ on, say, the Sand, for instance, you can see that the pink line is moving. And when I change the EQ setting on the Waves plugin, you can see that the red line is moving. So let's focus in on just one band of EQ. Let's focus in on high middle frequency. You can see that the kilohertz knob on Sand4 is set to 2049. However, on the Waves plugin, it's set to 2.99. They're both affecting the same frequency area, but they're set to different values. And the same can be said for the other bands as well. So I'm not really sure why Acustica Audio chooses to do stuff like this, but it's what they do. All right, moving on. I'm gonna go line 2 on the snare drum. It's a little hot. Calm that down. That's nice and solid. Get some compression going. All right, starting to come along. Go to the hi-hat. Line 3. Let me get all that low end out of there. Crush it a tiny bit, so I'll do a fast attack on the compressor. Tuck it in with the release. Overheads. I'm just gonna mute one of them and put it down the middle, and then apply the same setting to both of them. Line 4. Fill it up a little bit in the low frequencies. So I'm gonna set a quick attack and a quick release because I just want to give the overheads a little bit of shave when that snare hits. Yeah, it's like 2 decibels at most. And I'm just going to take a little bit of the low end out. Yeah, I just want it to light up when those harder hits come in. So now I'm just going to actually remove this and duplicate this to my second overhead channel. I'm going to pan this one back to hard left. So now I got the same setting on both overheads. Oh, there's something going on here. Yeah, the latency is not reporting right. I can hear it. So I have to close this session and reopen it. And we're back. Diving back in, let's look at the compressor. If you're unaware, it's like the most used bus compressor of all time. Like I said at the top of the video, if you've heard music, you've probably heard the acoustic imprint that this compressor has left on the last 40 years of music, about covering pretty much all genres aside from like documentary and classical. Now, as I understand it, CA is the channel compressor and CB and BA are the bus compressors. BA has that auto feature that the SSL has. I don't understand what the difference is other than that. I don't think there is one. I could be wrong. Acustica is known for being a little cryptic. So overall, the compressor is pretty well outfitted. It's got all the knobs that you would expect to see on an SSL bus compressor, as well as a few other ones. And some features that are unique to Acustica in general, such as the Schmod knob, which changes the overall attack characteristics. So you're usually going to want to start by setting the attack to the slowest and the release to the quickest, or to auto. I usually start with the fastest release. For harder hitting music, you're probably going to want to use a ratio of 4 pre-in. That just enables the preamp, and put it on ultra mode. And I'm going to be aiming for about 4 decibels of compression. Sounds pretty hi-fi. All right, it's starting to sound like a beat, but we need some space. We need some room to breathe. We need to make a fake room because this, while providing a nice, clean, punchy sound, doesn't do much in terms of reverb now, does it? I'm going to select all my tracks, go to bus, and I'll do bus 3 and bus 4. And I'm going to call up my preset room, which I use on a lot of things. This is the Clear Mountain Spaces plugin, which is like dead simple to use. So I'm going to be routing each individual microphone to this plugin. The hi-hat I'm not going to use. The majority of the signal is going to be coming from the overhead mics. Let's see how this sounds. Sounds nice in context. But like I said, I want to have more space around that snare drum especially, so I'll call up my snare preset. This is a plugin that I've been using a lot. It's the Arturia LX24, which is an emulation of the Lexicon 224, I believe. And then after this reverb, I just tailor it a little bit more with a Pro Q3. I take off some of that sizzle on the top and pretty much all of the low end. And then I'm just going to send, like I said, the snare to that. So actually, I'm going to remove all the other ones. So now I just have the snare drum going to it. It's coming in at a good level. So you can hear that Clear Mountain Spaces plugin kind of taking care of the lower frequency spectrum, and then the snare sits in the middle and on top a little bit. So now I mix those with each other. Sounds pretty decent. We're getting somewhere with this. What I want to do is I want to make this more interesting creatively. So I'm going to see about adding some tambourine and maybe some electronic elements, and we'll reconvene after that. Okay, so I took our basic loop and I added some ear candy, panned hard left and right in the form of a tambourine and an electronic hi-hat. And then I added some strength and some more low end, some more sub frequencies to the kick drum, and then a snare sample to strengthen up the snare. So I added this tambourine and then I heavily edited it. I'm always impressed at people who can record the tambourine really well. It's one of those instruments where you think like anybody can be good at it, but try recording it tightly into a mix. It's pretty impossible for me. So I end up editing out a lot of the washiness, a lot of the wish-wash. So then, of course, I added Sand4, and I followed it up with this plugin called THR. This basically makes anything that runs through it sound like it came from an old sampler from the 80s. When I see this plugin, I think like Beastie Boys, I think old gangster rap, just stuff from the 80s and early 90s. And, you know, if you listen back, of course, I used Sand because that's what I'm reviewing today in solo. Sounds cool, but adding in that grittiness, it gives it that like nostalgia and it takes off some of the harshness. Anyways, yeah, I panned that hard right. But that wasn't enough. Then I got out 2 instances of Superior Drummer. I thought of using an 808 hi-hat mixed in hard left. I just took the hi-hat track from this beat and I imported it into Tracker, which allows me to convert the audio into MIDI information and play it in Superior Drummer. We're getting there. I did use another channel strip on this, and I jacked up the mic preamp gain to kind of give it some analog flavor. I mean, these samples sound really good to begin with, but I'm just trying to make it blend in more with the rest of the elements. Anyways, then I did the same thing with the kick and the snare. I put the audio tracks into the tracker in Superior Drummer, and I got this. So I just dropped the MIDI file into Logic, and I made some more edits where every other measure, there's this kind of hefty bass sound. So the normal kick would sound like this. And then every other measure, you get that. It starts out right away with the boom. So that's pretty cool. I went from this to this. To this. The sub bass I followed up with this thing called PluginDoctor. This is sort of a safety net to make sure that those low sub electronic sounds don't ruin your mix pretty much. Now, if this was a full song with like a bass part and, you know, lyrics and all that, I would be mixing this a little bit differently. And, you know, I would do the car test and, you know, take it to the car and listen to it, put some headphones on, make sure that low end is tight. So Sand4, I'm kind of up in the air about it. What is really good is that, you know, in the past, Acustica audio plugins would be destroying my performance meter. And I've got 10 of these channel strips and some other plugins as well. I'm at about 50% on one core, but my buffer size is pretty low right now. I think it's like 128. You know, in Logic, you would just go to settings, audio, and you can raise your buffer here. Yeah, I'm at 128 right now. So if I was mixing, I would put that up to 1024, and that would give me some more headroom on my CPU. But what I like is that they're easy to use, but you got to know what you're doing. You got to know what your ears want to hear. You know, like when you're just starting out, you don't know that. When I was starting out, I used to hate hearing people just use your ears. It's like, well, okay, like if it sounds good, it is good, stuff like that. That's worthless. That's worthless advice. Like you could think that a full range bass sounds good, you know, from 30 hertz to 10,000 kilohertz. You're like, yeah, it sounds good. I can hear the low end and I can hear the ting 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 at the top. But you know, in a mix, you're not going to want that. Like you're not going to want a full range instrument like that. So it just takes some experience to be able to use tools like this comfortably. Yeah, like I said before, it's not a beginner's tool. Acustica Audio have this kind of like cryptic way of labeling things, but in terms of sound quality, it's right up there with the best of them. The compressor sounds a little bit different than I would typically really want from an SSL style compressor. What I usually use, across the entire mix bus, is the L-Bus version 2 by TimP, and this is a third-party Nebula 4 library. This is probably the closest thing you're gonna get to an SSL compressor inside of your computer. So real fast, let's see what this sounds like. Yeah, the Sand4, it does have this more pillowy thing going on. I don't know. I mean, maybe I could tweak it to get it to sound the exact same, but you know, right out of the box, it doesn't have that immediate sound. It certainly doesn't sound bad though, but I really do like the channel strip. And I really like how they have all the lines sampled and the mic pre's sampled. So next steps would be to add a bass part. This song is screaming for a nice bass line, and then maybe some cool little synth melody, some like Beastie Boys style lyrics or something. You'd have a real song on your hands. If you want to reach out and hire me for anything at all, I don't know, you got some like gutters that need cleaning or something. I actually just finished my website, comoproductions.com. You can reach out to me through here or some other way. Seriously, if you're looking for a producer or an engineer of some kind, don't hesitate to reach out. Anyways, I hope that you've taken away something useful from this video, and if you have, then please like and subscribe for more stuff, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.